From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports Podcast. I am Paul Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, William Collis. For those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do here is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. Now, for our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. We really appreciate you. Thank you for all the 5-star ratings and reviews. Thank you for all the love on social. Thank you for buying William's book, even though the best part is my foreword. But thank you. And if you haven't told your friends about the podcast, please do. It's the only way we continue to grow. And you know, if you like it, if you're enjoying it, why not tell them about it? William, how's it going?
You know, Paul, this
I'm running out of ways to shill your book, by the way. So like, that's as good as you're going to get now.
Oh, I was thinking of so many different ways. I was going to say, like, you know what makes a great Thanksgiving? Like a copy of the Book of Esports for every family.
No, that's a Christmas gift. That's not a Thanksgiving gift.
You know,
don't give that for Thanksgiving.
I think it goes July the 4th, you know, like President's Day, like any time is a time to get the greatest wealth of knowledge on the competitive gaming industry. No, but you know, it's Paul, you and I were talking about this before the podcast. It is the pre-Thanksgiving holiday crunch. You and I are swamped. But yes. This is just, I have to tell you, I look forward to the podcast so much every week. This is just such an oasis for me in terms of like just a great moment to chill out with somebody I truly respect, you know, hear some really smart views, you know, banter back and forth, discuss how aim assist is the greatest thing of all time. And
don't even get me started. Did you play the new Call of Duty over the weekend? Because I know it's the only time we have to play.
Paul, I don't have to play it. The aim assist does it for me. You're not happy? You're not happy?
No, I am not. I look, I think I'm going to talk about this on the live stream. So
yeah, I'm just totally shooting.
And it's weird, right? Because people are going to watch the live stream tonight and then they're only going to hear this podcast tomorrow because this comes out on Thursdays and we tape it on Wednesdays, right?
But true.
It's weird, but true. And it's the way it works. But I am going to go on such a rant on the live stream about aim assist being basically the end of esports. If this continues, the entire esports industry goes away. That's how bad I think it is. Look, I saw what was going on in Call of Duty over the weekend. I played the game quite a bit. It's so bad. I actually have zero respect for Call of Duty League players right now. To me, they are fake pros. These are not real professional esports players. They're not. They're just not that good. The computer's doing all the work for them.
Words from one of the largest and best capitalized esports leagues. Like you're gonna.
But the players are not the best in the world. They're fake pros. That's the hot
Well,
take.
you know, I have long maintained that the best shooter players in the world play Valorant.
Yeah, if you want to compare yourself against mobile players. Look, I give Valorant credit. Resisted the whole aim assist thing. It's one of the few games left that doesn't have it. Right? Well, we've got CS, we've got Valorant. What else? That's like everything else is full of aim assist.
I mean, Apex doesn't have aim assist. Oh, it does. It does.
Oh, it does. And it's horrible. What are you talking about? The console players are dominating right now.
I don't know.
Because the machine's doing all the aiming for them.
I don't know. I just like Apex, so I assume that it. Oh! Rainbow Six doesn't have aim assist.
Rainbow Six doesn't have aim assist.
Rainbow Six. That's part of the reason why it's also one of the greatest esports of all time. No aim assist. I agree. You know who else does not need aim assist?
I mean, I would assume, given the how important our guest is in the esports space, aim assist might be his nickname, even, right? Like.
It could be his nickname, but he wouldn't use it. He wouldn't use it. But no, in fact, it turns off if he picks up a controller. It actually, like, there's a little pop-up that says, you know, I'm going to spoil the guest, but Matt Hillman is playing. Aim assist disabled. Like, yeah.
Chuck Norris. That's it.
I'll let you intro our guest. No, I've spoiled it.
Matt is the esports Chuck Norris. I'm convinced. No, our guest today is Matt Hillman. Matt's the co-founder and partner at Cut and Sew and Zone Gaming, a marketing agency and brand studio focused exclusively on the gaming and esports space. Matt and his team work with established brands like HyperX, Venmo, as well as launch new brands. And some of these guys you've heard about because they've been in the news this week: Mavix Chairs, Queen's Gaming Collective. They pride themselves on helping clients authentically bridge the gap between gaming and culture. Matt, welcome to the Business of Esports podcast. It's so good to have you.
Thank you, guys. I'm excited to be here. That was an amazing little intro. The banter between you guys is phenomenal.
We're good, right? I mean, like,
it's because we're polar opposites. This is why it works. We couldn't be any more opposite and love each other more. That's the problem.
You know what, though? I have a sense Matt can banter well too. I think this is game recognizing game. That's what I
this
think.
Is game recognizing.
I love it. We're in for a fun episode then.
Matt, for our listeners and our viewers, could you tell our audience who maybe hasn't heard of you, I'd be surprised, but who maybe doesn't know your background, how you got into esports, what you're working on today, some of the things I talked about, maybe would love to get sort of the Matt Hillman story.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll spare you too much, but I launched a full service marketing agency that was completely outside of the esports space called Cut and Sew, coming up on 3 years ago now. So it was in January of 2018 with two partners. The three of us sort of just felt like we had really unique, but also diverse skill sets between, I had done a ton of work in the sports and entertainment space. My two partners were ground floor at a tech startup that became sort of a case study for consumer marketing. It was called Yik Yak, blew up on college campuses. They were the minds behind a lot of that. And so the three of us just kind of, linked up and realized that we wanted to build something together. And we had all been doing some consulting on the side and realized that an agency model was a really, really good way for us to be able to, it's not like, 1 + 1 + 1 = 9, right? It's not 3. So we put our heads together and started to build this business. It's a service-based business, work with companies big and small, and help them reach a younger, more sort of culturally aware demographic. That business is called Cut and Sew. Again, started it almost 3 years ago. And where gaming sort of came into the picture is through our work at Cut and Sew. Well, one, gaming is ubiquitous at this point, right? It is so far transcended its individual industry, and it's seeping into everything that we know. And so if you do anything in the world of sports and entertainment or music or culture, it's really hard to miss gaming. Wasn't always like that, but we were doing a lot of work with athletes who were really, really passionate gamers. And this was, late early 2018 when it wasn't commonplace to see athletes and celebrities streaming on Twitch. This was pre, Ninja and Drake. This was, it was a little bit of a different market. And one athlete in particular that we were working with is a guy named Josh Hart, who was on the Lakers at the time, is now on the New Orleans Pelicans. And, saw a genuine passion that he had for gaming, and being the good sort of partners that we were, we dove in and learned everything we could about it. So, fortunate enough to be in Los Angeles, and, which is where a lot of the publishers and the talent and the orgs are, and met with, every single person that we could, from executives at the different streaming platforms to, orgs, really just sort of made the rounds and went into full research mode. Eventually built his brand on Twitch really from the ground up, and did it in a way that was unique and like fresh and different from the space. We launched his Twitch through a pair of custom Fortnite sneakers, which he wore on ESPN with his gamer tag on them, which is like just sort of a non-gaming way to enter the space in a really fun way. And so we did that, very quickly. Sort of, he became a case study for how to build a brand on Twitch as a non-endemic talent. Has very quickly become, in my opinion, the most respected sort of athlete gamer out there. One thing led to another. We ended up working with other guys and put on the first ever all NBA Fortnite stream. It was called Ballers Only. And I think it was actually one of the highest ever debut Twitch streams, which of course has since been beaten. But just little things like that, we started to get our footing in the space, and existing clients who were not in gaming started to come to us and say, hey, how can we enter the space? We see you guys doing a lot of work in gaming. How can we do this? And so we realized, like, hey, there's a really cool white space here for an agency that can walk these worlds, play between these worlds really, really well. And so we, quietly for the last, I guess, 3 years or so have been doing gaming work under the Cut and Sew name. And it wasn't until recently that we sort of sat ourselves down and we're like, we can't be an industry agnostic agency and reach our full potential in the space because the gaming industry is too protective. It's too wary. It's too sort of aware of others that are looking to come in and exploit it, which, we like to think we're not doing. And so we built Zone Gaming, which sits under Cut and Sew, and it's exclusively dedicated to the gaming space. So it's, working with brands, both endemic and non-endemic, doing everything from social and digital to influencers to content to live event production, to brand strategy and brand identity, really anything on the marketing side, we feel really, really confident in doing. And then, I would say an interesting part about our mindset is we're not just a service business. So we're actually, people are coming to us and we're building businesses with them. We're taking this marketing agency infrastructure and we're applying it to IP that we have ownership in. We're investing off the balance sheet where it makes sense and where we can add value. We're working with individual talent on helping them build their brand on Twitch. So we're doing a little bit of everything. And that's sort of the genesis of how we got to where we are.
I have so many questions, Matt. I have so many questions. Can I start with one? Because you mentioned all the work you do with endemic and non-endemic brands, okay?
Yep.
One of my rallying cries, like this is something that I hit on so many times on the podcast.
Matt. Get ready. Right. Like, here's Paul shouting at the cloud. So look, get ready.
I teach an esports marketing class at St. Peter's, okay? And so by default, I have to teach them about endemic and non-endemic brands. Okay. It's just part of the curriculum because that is what the industry talks about, right? I personally hate this sort of differentiation between the two. And I'll tell you why. I hate it because it makes it seem like non-endemic brands don't really belong, right? Like endemic brands are special and are part of the group, and like non-endemic brands
in the sand or something.
Yeah. Right. And I kind of hate that because, and I've spent, quite a bit of time in the last 2 years educating brands. So sort of the piece before where you come in, which is like, why do we need to know about esports at all? And why is it interesting for us at all? And then they sort of decide what they want to do in there. But even as part of that education process, what I've realized is some of them do feel excluded in this non-endemic brand sort of category. My question to you is, do you really treat those two categories any differently when a brand walks in the door? And do you agree that maybe this differentiation is something that should go away?
I think we treat them differently.
Okay.
The reason we treat them differently is because, in my opinion, the gaming consumer is a ruthless one, right? And if you come at them in an inauthentic way, in a way that doesn't understand how they speak, their language, the emotes they use, and you don't speak to them in a way that like to be spoken, they'll write you off forever. And so I think that if you're a brand that, not to use this word again, if you've been traditionally non-endemic or you haven't entered the space before, I think it's really important to take a slightly different approach and make sure that you almost pay your respect and earn your stripes and pay homage to the culture in a way that maybe a brand who's been activating endemically for a really long time could skip over. And so that's the only reason I think I like to differentiate, is because there is a bit of just like a laying the groundwork that you have to do if it's your first time in the space. But generally, I agree with you. I mean, I think if a brand advertises in sports and another brand doesn't, you don't call them a sport brand or a non-sport brand. They're just brands. Yeah. So to that end, I agree completely. But I do think the approach has to be tailor-made.
But in both, in some ways, you kind of confirm my belief, which is authenticity is what's important here, regardless, right? The approach has to be authentic, whether you've been there 25 years or you've never been in the space at all, right? Totally. You're still going to be. If Logitech came out with something that was completely off the wall, inauthentic, something totally stupid, pandering to gamers, no one's going to be like, well, they've been authentic for the last 25 years, so we'll give them a break. No, they're still going to say this is cringe and they'll get roasted and whatever else, right?
Right, for sure.
So my other question is about agencies, which is we start to see a lot of these pop up, right? There's a lot of them that are all kind of saying we're gaming agencies, we do game marketing. What I'm finding is they all kind of fall into different buckets. And I feel like you guys have found an interesting sweet spot. And curious to get your thoughts on that. But the buckets that I see are like either you're a traditional agency that has done, worked with brands not in the gaming world at all, right? And now you want to dip your toe into gaming. Then you have the sort of the gaming only agencies that grew up in gaming, but don't seem to understand sort of the broader marketing universe, right? Like they maybe were not educated in that world, or they didn't grow up in that world, or didn't have any experience in that world. And I find both fail to a certain extent in sort of creating activations that work. I think where you guys are interesting is you came from the traditional marketing agency world, but have so much gamer DNA that it made sense to actually sort of pivot there or focus there through, at least through one business, right? Through Zoned. Like, is that fair to say? Is that how you look at your competition in the market?
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. I mean, there's every day you see an article about a massive ad agency that's entering the space through a insert agency here, FTW for the win. Like not throwing any shade, but like you're gonna see that, and ultimately, like you said, the authenticity is going to reign true. But yeah, I mean, I think, we've all come from big agency backgrounds. We understand how they operate. Even prior to launching Zoned, we built Cut and Sew to be sort of the antithesis of that. We've all seen what it looks like to be on the inside of a big agency. You go win, a $5 million a year retainer client, you hire 50 people against it, you lose that client, you fire 50 people, and you're shuffling the same sort of pod of creatives around from client to client, whether they like it or not. So take gaming completely out of it. We flip that model on its head. We're lean, in-house. We have executives and account management and strategy and anything creative. Well, fortunately, my co-founder's a creative, and he's our creative director, and he's phenomenal. But whether photo, video, design, we have the best freelancers in the world at our fingertips, and we believe they want to work for themselves. And we also don't like overhead. So it's a mutually beneficial scenario. So from a business model standpoint, we're set to weather this in a big way. And then when it comes to actual, gaming knowledge, I don't think I can say it better than you did. I think we're perfectly in the middle ground. We're not completely siloed to esports, and we haven't been for the past 20 years, to the point where like we have a chip on our shoulder and we don't want to let the outside world in, and we're also not outsiders. And I think the magic and the sweet spot, I think, is really finding a way to bridge that gap and merge those worlds. So that's what we love to do.
Yeah, I think that's what's been lacking. Like, I haven't seen that. Sorry, William, what were you going to say?
Well, it is interesting you brought it, because that's a funny thing that like I don't hear a lot of people calling out, but I see a lot in the space, which is there is definitely a sense of like, I've been here for 15 years. I deserve this. Like, who are all these stupid new fancy things coming in with money and resources? And, in my day, like we did esports marketing like this. I don't know. It's just interesting that you called that out, because like I've never heard somebody really say that explicitly, but it's very true, particularly on the agency side, right? Like the people who've been in the space for a while, like there are definitely agencies that have been in space for a while that don't exemplify this. But in general, I think the ones I've been for a while have like a little bit of frustration and almost hedging against the new entrants, which I think it's interesting that you call out. But I got to ask two questions. So first is a really silly question, but I always like to ask this of marketing agencies. Cut and Sew. Why did you pick that name for the agency? I'm just curious.
Yeah. First off, the amount of people that reach out to us for like sewing, like literally like asking if we're like seamstresses is insane.
On that note, Matt, we need some Business of Esports merch. Do you think Cut and Sew could help us?
Yeah. The funny thing is, we definitely can. We have
Matt's doing the chair deal with me. We talked about this in the pre-podcast prep. Like,
we need a Business of Esports chair. Limited edition.
That's honestly, we do need a Business of Esports branded chair, and it needs to be called.
We don't need a chair.
Yes, we do. It needs to be called the C-Suite. And
the C-Suite. All right.
SWEET, right?
If we're gonna do a Business of Esports chair, it has to cost like 10 grand. Like I don't want like a $500 chair here.
It comes with built-in aim assist.
Built-in aim assist. I want everything gold.
I would love that if somebody launched a chair with built-in aim assist.
Finish your question.
Right,
Sorry.
Cut and Sew. I want to know, because it's a marketing agency. So like I'm always interested in how agencies name themselves. Why do you choose to present that way?
Yeah. We you'll hear me talk a lot about experience that we've had both in-house and just working with really, really large agencies. And ultimately, like, the thing that rings true is just that it's a very standardized, impersonal process. Oftentimes they're even repurposing documents from one client to the other. I can legitimately say that every single scope that we've had with every single client throughout the life of our business has been vastly different from the other. And so we're cutting and sewing, solutions based on need. It's a problem first mentality, and it's not, this is what we do, take it or leave it. We wear a lot of hats and we're really diverse. And so we're cutting and sewing solutions, scopes, all of that.
I get it. Out of whole cloth, right? That's
exactly
the illusion.
Well, like each one is like made to measure. I think that's the kind of the,
for sure. Custom, unique.
Yeah. You might say it's a bespoke outfit. All right, Paul, we can stop with the tailor metaphors.
It's bespoke for sure. When we were coming up with a name early days, we were like playing with how do we throw bespoke in there? But I'm glad you brought it up.
Okay, that was my easier question, but here's my harder question, which I think is maybe not that hard, but I'm curious. So you talk a lot about authenticity and brand launch and the needs for brands that have not been, and I also don't like the endemic term, even though I use it, even actually part of the book, it's in one of the diagrams because I think it's useful as a shorthand. But you mentioned, the non-endemics have to sort of pay homage, right? So could you give an example? Because I think we get a lot of esports people listening to the podcast, but we also just get a ton of marketers listening to the podcast who just like have general questions about how they market esports and maybe are with a legacy brand that's trying to figure out how to get into the space and is scared for the reasons that you brought up. So can you give me an example of, let's say a traditional, a non-endemic for the sake of this, entering esports, someone who's done paying that homage well and someone who hasn't, so that our listeners can kind of understand that difference.
I think Totino's has done a really good job. I think their partnership with 100 Thieves is phenomenal. I think that, gaming and esports is so culturally just so unique, and the way that they speak, like qualitatively, I think you just have to really understand that. Partnerships are obviously a super important aspect. So how are you aligning with the right people, and not just doing a, hey, holding up an Xbox controller and a thing of Totino's and say, hey, I'm gaming and I'm eating Totino's, but truly embracing it and letting the creatives in the space lead, and becoming a part of their world and their cast of characters, in the way that they have sort of in the 100 Thieves world and the 100 Thieves compound. I'm really impressed with what they've done. Someone who hasn't done a good job. It's a good question.
I told you it was a hard question. There's a hard question. To it.
I want to bring up Champion. I think that in some ways they've done a really good job. I really like the HyperX collab that they did. I really like the FaZe Clan collab. It was a massive success. They recently did a line of, I think, esports specific apparel. And one of the articles of clothing, I think they called gamer pants. And that obviously doesn't resonate with that market. I'm
wearing gamer pants right now.
I don't know what you're talking about, Matt. That's literally whenever I go to Kohl's, that's what I ask for.
No. To me, gamer pants are no pants. That's what gamer pants are.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say that's an example of a brand that's done poorly. I think that was one thing that I might have done differently in an otherwise successful run from them. But yeah, does that answer your question, William?
It does. I'm going to circle back on this. I'm going to give you some time to think about it. But I do think for listeners, it is really helpful to understand, hey, when you launch badly, it really has a poison the well risk. So I might circle back. I reserve the right to push you on that a little harder.
Yeah, for sure. I'll think about some other examples too.
I do think a counter example is fun, but we can move on for now, and I'm sure there'll be an opportunity to bring it back because we got some marketing stories today too.
Well, I want to touch on the Josh Hart stuff before we sort of move forward. And you sort of said it in your intro, Matt, that this was one of the first real activations with an NBA star or any sports kind of celebrity, right? Getting into the gaming world. How do you look at that, at what's happening today? Do you find anything has changed? What do you guys think you did with Josh, that made that activation successful? Like, I'm curious what insight sort of you've had since then around celebrities getting into gaming, because to me, it can work very well or it can work very badly. It's really a very binary outcome, it feels.
Totally. I mean, I think first and foremost, I want to give him just a lot of credit for his, like, not just his passion, but his resilience. I mean, for someone who has, 700,000 followers on Instagram, you guys probably know it's really not easy to convert those over to Twitch. It's really hard. I mean, you'll have people with millions of followers, they'll do a swipe up on their story and they'll be streaming for 100, 200 people max. And so it's a changing of a mentality that I think it's really important for talent to understand. It's like, you're not going to bring all of your followers over here with you. And if you're known for one thing, they might not want to know you for something else. And that's okay. So, I mean, it's been a journey. It's been a 3-year journey for him. And he still doesn't have crazy numbers, but he's really put the time in. And so, I think that especially, once COVID hit, there's every athlete and celebrity was trying to enter the space. They were reaching out to orgs and saying, "Hey, let's co-stream," and very much looking for a quick come up. Josh has friends who are on pro teams or are coaches on pro teams or are deep in the space, and he won't even say, "Let's stream." He'll be like, "Hey, let's get some games in." And I think that's like a really easy way to tell whether someone's looking to kind of like, clout chase when they're entering the space, is like they're, "Hey, let's game," and just very quickly kind of do that. I mean, certainly you can tell like by how much love and attention someone puts into their stream setup. If they're just hopping on with like no cam or, the PS4 interface or, a shitty face cam, then like, when people stream right from the PS4, like there's ways to tell. And I think people get weeded out very quickly. And so, we've been fortunate that we've now, had a lot of people come to us and say, "Hey, help me. I see all this money that's being made, all this, all that." And we've gotten good at seeing who's in it for the right reasons and who it's actually worth our time to like grind with. And there's, the overwhelming majority of them will quit after like a month.
Well, that's a good sort of second question, which is this sustainable, right, for most of these guys, or is this like flash in the pan? It's a little bit of a trend right now, right? It's cool to be a celebrity that games, and 2 years from now we won't even be talking about it. Like, is that the outcome you see, or do you think some of these celebrities, athletes might actually have sustainable, maybe even second careers in gaming?
Yeah, I think it's super sustainable. Like I said, if you're doing it the right way and you have that passion and the skill and like the entertainment ability, I think it's really scalable. I think that it's going to be a very, and it already is, a very central part to a lot of athletes' brands and how they interact with their fans. I mean, Josh will, play a game and then he'll stream live on Twitch after the game, and his chat will be asking him questions as if it's a post-game interview. And it's just a completely new sort of one-to-one interaction. And even take gaming out, even if it's just chatting, like Twitch is an amazing medium for that. And so, live isn't going anywhere. Gaming isn't going anywhere. Personalities aren't going anywhere. And so if you build it sort of brick by brick, it can be a really important part of your brand, and both financially as well as just, I guess like qualitatively.
How much does the career extension piece play into this logic at all? Because Paul touched on it. I think it's really interesting. Like, do any of these athletes or influencers come to you and say like, "Look, like, part of why I want to do this is because I know I can't play basketball when I'm 40, but I could maybe still be doing." Does that factor into anybody's reasoning, or is career extension, or that is sort of like post athletic career halo? Is that part of it?
Not that I've seen. Maybe we work with Myers Leonard as well, who's a center on the Miami Heat, and he's an amazing gamer. I could actually see him wanting to play competitively when he's done with basketball. But I think for the most part, especially in gaming, where it feels like the shelf life of creators and of talent is very short, and guys are retiring, I mean, at young ages. I think for a lot of these athletes, by the time they're on their second career, they'll be, if they're blessed, like late 30s. And so I just think it's really hard to forecast out where gaming will be then, but I do think they're very much seeing it as a form of just brand building and audience acquisition, and a way to just grow your following through something really cool. But I wouldn't say that they're necessarily like, "Hey, I'm doing this so that I can game in a second life."
The other thing that's interesting.
Go ahead.
The other thing.
No, I just wanted to say, was that the primary motivation then, Matt? Is it really brand building?
Yeah, I think it's well, brand building. It's following a passion, like streaming or not. These dudes love to game. They bring their consoles on the road with them. Josh has fully switched over to mouse and keyboard. Doesn't even play console anymore. Like he's really intense about it. Yep. And so yeah, I mean, I think that he knows that he's not a LeBron or a Kevin Durant, where he's afforded a lot of interview opportunities, and unless he sort of takes matters into his own hands, you're not going to know much about him. And so he has a podcast for the same reason. And gaming is not only something he loves, but something he can use to connect with his fans.
It's just I just cannot believe I live in a world where like gaming is a brand building exercise for pro athletes. Like I think we need to pause and all realize like how amazing. Like I just go back to the first time I got a Game Boy and like what I thought gaming was and where we've come to, and I just like. It's a wild ride.
The coolest thing too is
I've been brand building since 3 years old, guys. Come on.
Yeah,
that's what I've been doing.
Exactly right.
The coolest thing too is the mutual respect between the two. Like these athletes don't scoff at it at all. They look at these gamers honestly like gods, and they have like so much respect for them. Like, OBJ and Dr. Disrespect were streaming together a month ago, and like OBJ was like really excited to be there, which I think is cool.
Yeah, everyone loves the doc. I mean, that's an easy one.
Violence, speed, momentum is still the greatest comedy in 3 words in the English language.
Yeah. Sorry, William. What were you going to say?
Oh, no, I was asking. It's interesting. You also said audience acquisition, though, and that was interesting for me, just because like it's kind of underscoring something that I'm starting to realize more and more. And tell me if this is true in your positioning, or at least in the belief that the people are using the stream. But is there a real sense that this is a truly incremental audience that's being picked up? In other words, this is Josh getting gamers to like him, right? Or getting gamers to become versus just getting, for example, people who like basketball and also like gaming, right? So if I'm doing the Venn diagram, right, it's the sense of, is he getting the middle space here, the overlap of you like gaming and basketball, this is good for you, or is it truly opening up a completely different audience class, which is gamers who wouldn't be following Josh if he didn't do this gaming stuff?
I think it's both. One funny tweet that happened when he was on the Lakers was, so he was like going really hard with it to the point where, again, this was a couple years ago. It wasn't as developed as it is now, but sometimes like front offices and like GMs are like, hey, you need to like calm down with the gaming, and you need to be focused. And it's like, what does that mean? Like, would you rather your player like be in the club, right? Like, it's like he's playing video games. So that's a whole thing in itself. But someone tweeted at him one time, was like, oh my God, Josh Hart, the Fortnite player, plays basketball, which was like a surreal thing to read. I mean, if you really think about it. And so, yeah, I mean, I think in the same way that the most popular Twitch streamers are not the best gamers, people want to watch someone who's solid at the game, but is hilarious and like has an amazing personality. And Josh rages like no other. He breaks keyboards. He one time threw a controller and it ricocheted off his monitor and almost hit his girlfriend, who was like 10 feet behind him. He stomped out his keyboard. And am I allowed to curse on the podcast or no?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, so I think that's fine.
He stomped out his keyboard and he goes, "Fuck this game! Fuck this game! Fuck!" Like whether you're a basketball fan or not, that is comedy. And so, yeah, I think he's got a lot of fans that aren't necessarily in it for his basketball side.
Interesting. Can we talk about stuff that's been in the news for you, Matt? Because these are companies you are actively involved with, and I'll just bring up this one. It was a story from the Esports Observer from about a week ago now. And it says, X-Chair launches gaming chair company Mavix, lines up talent ambassadors to promote new chair lines. And we've got Tex and we've got Valkyrie here and a few others, right? How did you get involved with this? And what is the thinking behind it? Why gaming chairs, right? Because this is not just a client, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. This is a company you're much more actively involved with. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious, what's the thinking here?
Yeah. just even seeing that article was like kind of surreal because this has been a labor of love. Like first off, we went from like idea to launch in like 6 months, which for anything like hardware related is nuts. The way that it started is, as you saw on that screen, it was launched by a company called Xchair. Xchair is one of the leading office chair manufacturers in the United States. They're incredibly successful. One of the more respected players in space. Incredible product, highly ergonomic. A premium, $1,000 plus chair. I've known their CEO for a really long time. Prior to my existence in gaming, I went to high school with his son. I was his assistant basketball coach. 10 years ago, maybe even longer. And so, yeah, we've known each other for a really long time. He and his son saw that I was doing stuff in gaming and reached out, and it was really just, at first I was kind of like, what are the synergies here? Like, what's the deal? He pretty much said it. He said, we've looked at every gaming chair in the market. They all suck. They're all that racer style chair. He also started a line of ergonomic back stores in the DC area called the Healthy Back Store. So he knows ergonomics. He knows what's good for your back and what's not. He's been doing it for 20 plus years, sold hundreds of thousands of chairs. And he said, look, these all suck. People are reaching out to us as Xchair saying, I'm using your chair for gaming. And this chair was not even built for gamers. And so we really looked at the market and we're like, wow, there's really a white space for a cool, stylish, but highly ergonomic chair brand that comes in and preaches functionality, preaches ergonomics, it preaches style, it preaches the ability to move back and forth between gaming and work. We think that the work from home crowd and the gaming professional, as we like to call it, is a huge market for us, folks like yourself. And so we set out to build it.
Flattering to be called a gaming professional.
Right? Not a professional gamer, but a gaming professional.
Whoa. Yeah, don't take it back.
Yeah, I would apply both.
William can speak for himself. Don't include me and William in the same gaming category here.
Have you seen my Heroes of the Storm match history, Matt? Because it is pretty spicy for Gold League.
I'll have to watch it.
Don't put us in the same bucket, Matt. Let's be clear here, all right?
No, Paul is very good at shooters. He's legit very good.
Then he's our.
I'm just teasing. But Matt, like, look, in a world where, and I'm a huge Herman Miller fan, right? Like huge. I don't have one. I have two of the M bodies.
Cards on the table. Paul has an Aeron tattoo.
I have an Aeron at the office, right? So like I'm Herman Miller through and through. And I laughed at the entire racing chair phenomenon because as someone who drove race cars, and we talked about this before the show, like, racing chairs are meant to be uncomfortable. Fundamentally, they're meant to keep you in the seat when you're racing. And so they're supposed to sort of squeeze your body tight so you don't get those lateral G forces and you can stay in control of your car, right? Horrible as gaming chairs. Never understood it. What I love is you guys completely sort of went in a different direction. We're not lured by the entire gaming chair phenomenon. What is the price tag on the Mavix chair?
There's 3 models. I'm sitting in one. I'm sitting in the M9, which is my favorite, all white. Really, really nice material. This one is $999. Middle of the road one is $777, and then the model below that is $555. All of them have Xchair's patented lumbar support technology, which is called a dynamic variable lumbar, which moves with you as you move. In gaming, if you're sitting for long hours, I think lumbar support is probably the most important thing, and most racer chairs solve that through a pillow. So that, obviously that's just not going to suffice. So yeah, those are the 3 price points. We like where we sit in the market. I mean, you mentioned Herman Miller. There's nothing bad to say. You can't say anything bad about Herman Miller, right? They're phenomenal what they do, and they make an amazing chair. I think the space is big enough for many players, and I think we're priced more competitively than them. And I think we're a lot closer in quality than we are in price. And then on the other hand, you have, chairs who I won't mention who sell for $299, who will break on you after a year. We have a 12-year warranty, which is absolutely insane.
Well, that's warranty. Like the Herman Miller 10-year warranty, right? Yeah. Like it's what people expect from. But I'm curious how many.
I actually hold it. I got to tell Matt this because I actually have a closet in my basement with all my broken gaming chairs. because like I think like I'm gonna do something with them, like do a project, like make like a home
What are you
theater
gonna do
thing.
with them?
I don't know. Like I just like because like they're just but they break all the time. I would say I go through like, and by the way, like first of all, like it's not like I'm actively like, you know, like, oh good gaming chair, let's jump up and down on this and try to like I'm sitting in it like an office chair and moving a mouse. But I would say I broke a gaming chair every, I would say 7 months to 9 months for a period of time. Like
that's actually
like,
insane.
I was shocked.
Doesn't
I was
surprise
shocked
me
how much they broke.
Doesn't surprise me. So yeah,
It's
I mean,
the armrests, they're so cheap. They're so cheap. They shatter if you put any weight on them, like you're getting up or like you're leaning over on a conference call. You're like, oh, that deal. Oh, and like, anyway, that's my
here's
pet peeve,
what I wanted to get at was the price points, right? Because I'm curious. I don't know if you can give us this insight, but of those 3 price points, where do you think you guys are going to move the most chairs? Like we've had conversations about the chair market. It's weird that gaming chairs is such an important sort of category, right? But I guess in a sport that involves so much sitting, it makes sense. But like of those 3 price points, what is the expectation in terms of which one's going to be the biggest hit with the market?
Yeah. So I can tell you to date, this one, not this particular colorway, but the highest end model has been our best seller by far, which we're happy about, because for us, like we're looking at a market where, you know, people will spend $3,000 to $5,000 on a custom PC build, but will scoff at a chair that's going to save your back for the rest of your life. And so, you know, our challenge was the chair is an accessory that's never been celebrated. It's never been glorified. You see, you know, forward facing peripheral advertising for headphones, for mouse and keyboard. You don't ever see it for the chair. It's always just kind of there. And so our thought was, how do we flip that on its head? How do we make the chair an accessory that people actually celebrate? And I think, you know, we set out to do that with an absolutely star-studded group of influencers, a badass content, and just a really, really cool brand that, you know, we brought in the brand designer. We brought in, led rebrands for Instagram and Spotify, and did like the art direction around the BB Adapt. Like this every sort of part of this has been meticulously built. And so far we're happy with where we're at.
I truly want to say it to me, it comes off to me really ballsy, like for lack of a better word, in the sense that the other competition up until now and the most popular chairs come at lower price points, right? You see a lot of racing chairs at the $200 to $400 kind of dollar mark for the
300
for the
like
bigger brands, right?
Chair, yeah.
And totally. That's what you see most streamers using, and they sponsor a lot of streamers. Like they make a big effort to be in front of people. Or at least on stream, and to come in the market and say, you know, we're going to start about sort of twice the average there, and really go after the Herman Millers of the world, which I think is probably more where you guys want to like where you see your competition being. To me, that's ballsy, right? Because I've always been unsure. Like for me, I never had any doubt. The chair, I sit in it 10 hours a day. Of course, it's worthwhile, right? And I think, to your point, maybe more people are starting to do that math, and maybe they're becoming less and less price sensitive to their chair. Like, I don't know if this is a trend, but the fact that you've come into the market at 2 or 3 times the price what the racing chairs are going for, and had success, and you're not Herman Miller, the brand that's been around 50 years, right? That to me says you've hit on maybe some kind of market trend, and you've done a lot right in terms of the launch. I don't know, Matt, have you come to different conclusions, or William, maybe you think differently here?
Well, I just want to say, I think one of the things people don't realize is gamers are pretty price insensitive as a demo. Like I think historically we have this perception of the gaming market being 13-year-old kids, right? And the reality is it's aged up significantly. Most of them are young professionals. It's a primary hobby. We all know there's plenty of studies that say hobby spend is 10, 15% of your total household income, regardless of how much you earn. It scales linearly with it. So I think it's just an extremely price insensitive demo. And I think it's like, I don't know if you agree with that, Matt. I mean, obviously we have to have the quality to justify the price, but I think brands chronically underprice in the esports market today. Chronically.
Yeah. I think, Paul, you're right. I mean, there's nothing about it that wasn't ballsy, from like flipping the aesthetic on its head to going to market, you know, with huge influencers in a space that they don't typically endorse. But I can say we're really happy with where we are from a sales standpoint. We've exceeded expectations. There was a little bit of pushback on the first day, but it's funny, as people's chairs started coming in from when they ordered, they then hopped in and defended us on social media, because they'll say, one, I've never sat like anything like this for my back, and two, like, let's talk in 6 years when you've spent if the same amount of money, if not more, on 6 different chairs. And so, we're standing by our quality, we're standing by our product, we're standing by our brand and our brand voice. We want to do things differently, and we feel like we're in a really good spot. Like I said, I think that's a really big space. I think that if you want to spend $200 on a chair, there's amazing companies for you to do that with. If you want to spend, where we're at, I think we're a great offering, and so, we're excited. And I also think, to your point, like, health and wellness in gaming and self-care is massively on the uprise, in a way that it wasn't 20 years ago, when, like, the stereotype of what some outdated people still think gamers are, like, what kind of was. Some of the best gamers that we see, not the best gamers, some of the most high profile gamers that we see are in incredibly good shape. I mean, look at Nick Merckx. Nick Merckx is jacked out of his mind. Valkyrie goes to the gym. Valkyrie goes to the gym every day. Like, it is really cool to be a great gamer and take care of yourself, and good posture is a great way to do that.
Yeah, when I saw that announcement and the photo that was in it, and for those listening to the podcast, unfortunately, you can't see the photo of the story. The only influencer I saw in there was Valkyrie, and the rest sort of blend into the background.
We wanted
great. There was a great catch there.
Hex was another, like, important X factor there. I mean, we wanted to fill it out with everyone that, like, spoke to a different side of gaming, right? You have Josh, who's the athlete turned gamer. You have, Valkyrie, who's just the monster content creator that she is, a variety streamer. You have Swag, who's kind of like the new kid on the block, and you have Hex, who is the OG of all OGs, and is certifying this and having his competitive players use it, So
look, we'll have to try it at the Business of Esports at some point. I mean, I don't know. Yep. When William not being on that photo, I was a little bit
I was
offended.
Say,
but
Matt,
his agent. We called his agent.
And I've been saying, Tim, Tim, you got to pick up the calls, and Tim says there's just so many. Like, how, and I keep
damn Tim and his laziness. Yeah. Costing you these gigs, William. I
know, because I would have been there. I would have been there, and I would have sat in that chair.
You would have been good. I think you would have been good. Let's move on, guys. Because I want to touch on. Actually, before we move on, one last question for you, Matt, which is, you've done chairs now, right? I'm curious, if you were to do something else, call it in the hardware space, like some other hard good. Where you're more actively involved than just sort of as a marketing agency. What do you think would be next for you? What do you think is the next most interesting category in the gaming and esports space?
I had a call. I don't want to say the name because they're in pre-launch, but I had a call with a luggage company that focuses on carrying cases for your respective gear, but in a really cool, stylish way. And I was blown away. And by what they're making, and I think portability of equipment is something that hasn't really been done right.
Interesting, very interesting.
Yeah,
cool. I'm just curious what you see as the next most interesting opportunity. Let's talk about, guys. I want to jump into some news this week because there are some big stories that I think are worth us touching on. This probably, in my mind, the biggest. Yeah. And it was from Dexerto.com. And the headline here is Riot Games shopping English streaming rights to League of Legends esports. So supposedly Riot now is looking to have League streamed exclusively on one platform. And the developers have confirmed that. And they're shopping it. So they're shopping around these rights, basically. And it's all English language countries, essentially. So not just the Western events, but anything that happens in an English language country. William, sorry, you giving me the timeout sign. What's up?
When you're done with the intro, I get to have my I called it moment. So, like, are we done with the intro? Because I'm I'm ready to say I called this like hard. Like,
Sure, I'm done. So you did call it, but we called it, I would say.
Oh, okay. We called it together, but full credit. And like, we didn't call it like 2 weeks ago. We called it like
months and months ago.
When the podcast first started, we were like, what are going to be one of the big trends? And we're like, look, guys, this content that you see, it's going to move exclusive. It's going to be a channel differentiator, right? Like,
well, I think with like the moves that happened with stars going from platform to platform and audiences not moving, I think the conclusion we both came to was content's king, and content is what drives people to move. And we were going to see a trend of more and more exclusive content, right? Content exclusive to a platform. Here's the big question for both of you. So aside from, as always, things being called right on the Business of Esports, and those listening, this is why you listen, because we call things years in advance.
In this case, like 2.5 years, like we were like longer. Anyway, sorry. We really called this shot.
Where does Riot go with this? The question is, other than Twitch, who's in the running? Caffeine? Like, I don't know. YouTube. YouTube already spent, I assume, spent quite a bit of money on Overwatch League and Call of Duty League. Like, who's really in the running other than maybe
Google
those
money, though?
That's true. So they do have deep pockets. They have a history of underperforming relative to Google and YouTube proper, though, like of not doing a lot with the Google resources they have at their disposal. YouTube Gaming does, at least.
All right. I got to jump. Wait. Before I jump in and totally take the thunder, Matt, who do you think this goes to? Make a prediction.
Let's call it, Matt.
Yeah.
Based on what would be mutually beneficial, I have trouble seeing it living anywhere else besides the two that you mentioned, Paul. If you're just looking at
Twitch, YouTube, and caffeine, let's say between those three,
I don't think it's not going to live on caffeine.
No.
Come on.
Although
don't
they
just dismiss caffeine out of it. Give them some credit. Like,
let's just be clear. For the Chinese rights, they went to Bilibili, which is arguably the caffeine of China, right? In that Huya and Douyu are the two biggest, right? Are kind of the YouTube.
Make you a shirt, the caffeine of China.
That's actually a great shirt, actually. And Bilibili,
incredible shirt. Our merch line is on fire. I'm telling you right now.
Yeah, it's going to be 3 people who get the joke.
But those 2 people, they'll meet each other on the subway one day, and they'll both be like, "Oh,
they'll know."
That's
Highlander.
Yeah,
okay.
No, but arguably, like, I get it, right? Caffeine, no one barely like even talks about it, but Tencent did avoid their own platforms that they owned, and ended up sort of passing on the rights to League and let it go to a third party. I don't know how that's relevant here.
Is there like a Disney play with the ESPN ownership? After
ESPN just shut down their esports operations. Yeah, I would have agreed with you maybe like a week ago as a potential play.
Yeah, I know they shut it down editorially. Are they no longer even would they? You don't think they would broadcast it? Something?
I'm not sure. I don't know. William, I don't know if you have any better insight, but I don't.
I got to tell you, actually, Matt, I think it's brilliant. I think strategically, this would be an amazing pickup for Disney Plus.
That would be smart,
but it would be Disney Plus. This is the sort of thing Disney can do, should do. They won't do because they consistently show that they can't quite get gaming, and they get so close. Like, the story of Disney and gaming is it's like falling in love through a chain link fence. It's like they get so close to the other person, they can touch it and they can feel that, but they just can't hug.
It's true.
It can't happen. Like, so I do. But yeah, I would look, if they did it, I'd be blowing up champagne bottles. I think it's brilliant. But I'm going to make my call. Ready? Here's my call.
It's really a YouTube or Twitch race. Let's be honest. No. Or caffeine.
And I think I'm right about this. Brace yourself, guys. This is going to go to something like Trovo. It's going to go to one of the Chinese or Tencent owned streaming platforms as a beachhead strategy for a North American launch.
Interesting.
I'm telling you right now.
So you think one of the Chinese platforms will want to get into English language countries, and will use this?
It's long been coming that you would scale this. This is an automatic category maker. they're funded appropriately to bid on this and to give Amazon a run for their money. And you're looking at me skeptically.
I was going to say, does Trovo have Tencent money?
Yeah, Trovo's Tencent, bro.
But then that doesn't make sense, right? Because they didn't give the Chinese rights to their own Chinese platforms.
It's different. And I actually almost wonder if part of the reason why they didn't give the rights to their Chinese platforms was so they could move the rights here. Now, I don't actually think that's how Tencent operates. I think it's much more on a portfolio basis. I think they're going to do this for a different reason. But strategically, right, you would want to avoid the impression, like if you know you're going to use League as your crown jewel to launch a new market for your existing infrastructure, and Tencent is merging their streaming infrastructure, right? And this is a pipe business. It should be global, right? Like you should have it doesn't need to regionalize. You would want to avoid an impression of, oh, everything Tencent owns just go exclusive on Tencent platforms. So you get the extraction from Bilibili where you've already run in China, you don't need it. And you leverage the property where you do need it for the North American launch. But I think they're going to do it for a much simpler reason, which is I think those guys will pay the most money. I really do. They'll pay the most money because at the end of the day,
Tencent paying themselves.
Well, yeah, basically, right? Like it's the willingness to pay is high because I'm moving it from one bank account here to another bank account there, right? It's not quite true because the money does leave to Riot, but you know what I mean, right? Well, I guess Riot's owned by Tencent, so it is bank account to bank.
Wholly owned, not even partially owned, wholly owned.
Across business unit, but whatever. But so it is bank account to bank. So that's one reason why they can pay because they're robbing themselves to pay themselves. But the other reason is this is such a kingmaker, right? Like having the LCS, like you will get it's not like people won't watch or won't follow. If this is the only place to get English language LCS, you will have 100% of that fan base coming over. Like the attrition rate on this is going to be like 2%. What? You're telling me there's a hardcore League viewer who goes, what? I mean, it's going to be marketed like hell in the Riot launcher to start with. So this is the businesses that spend on this are the businesses that don't just need to sustain, they need to grow. And those are new market entrants. So I am telling you right now, I think it's a simple strategy on Tencent. They meant what they said with Bilibili. We gave it to the person who will pay the most. We saw in China, the newer, weaker entrant was willing to pay the most. I suspect this is a similar case. And the only reason why I don't think this goes to caffeine is I don't think they have the pockets to do it. I don't think they can get those rights, even with Fox and some of their other banking. But the Chinese streaming platforms can and will. And strategically, I just cannot believe it is not on their roadmap to export themselves internationally.
Matt, what do you think? What's your call on this after hearing William's crazy Trovo idea here?
So I don't know enough about Trovo, but I think what you're saying makes sense. And you have my wheels turning of how does someone who's natively not North American use this as a way to build a massive North American audience? One other company, and I have no idea if they have the pockets for it, but who has done it recently in boxing is DAZN. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them, DAZN. I mean, they have pretty deep pockets. Someone, again, don't know if they can afford this, but like that is another group that stands a lot to gain by entering this market in a big way. And they've shown that they're willing to do it sort of in siloed ways with like unique sports.
What do you guys think this goes for in terms of pricing? So just to give you just to sort of position this a little bit, the article says the deal for the Chinese rights was a 3-year deal worth 113 million. So roughly like 40 million a year, roughly, right? 39 million a year, 38 million a year, something like that. Yeah, 38 million a year. That's just for Chinese rights. What do you think is the price tag when all's said and done here? Do we think the English rights are going to go for more? Do we think they're going to go for less? I mean, William, in your Trovo example, is this?
I was literally trying to do math because I think you can just back into what it's going to go because it's going to go as a portion of the chat. This is still going to sell an impression basis, right? It's going to go roughly on a price appropriate impression for LCS versus. So what? NA viewership for the LCS is what, like 35% versus China is going to be what, like 45? Is that about right regionally? I'm guessing.
Say that again, William.
Like US viewership will be about 35% of total viewership for League. Chinese viewership will be about 40%. That leaves 25% for rest of world. That's probably right, rough and tough, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So this will tell you it'll go for what is that, the ratio on that? That's like,
I'm not sure though. Like I've heard numbers as big as like Chinese is an order of magnitude bigger than at least the US, which I would assume is the majority of English language.
It might be huge. So say it's 50% versus 30%, because I don't think it's less than 30% in NA. League is huge here. Right. Maybe it's 25. It'll go for between half. Let's say half off is the lowest point.
Okay.
This is 60 to 70 million.
That feels small to me.
Feels low.
Feels low.
That's why I think
for something that's such a trophy, right? Because there's a trophy factor here.
There's some sort of multiple that you have to factor in for the trajectory too, you know?
But that's why I think the new entrant pays for it, because at the end of the day, you're right. Like on an impressions basis, because we just did impressions math, which would be the maintenance math, what you could market against for this, what you would justify as a platform. The value, it does feel, say it's 80 million, right? It feels low. You would think these NA rights would go for like 125 million, right? I think it gets there the person who pays the most on the trophy factor, and that's the person who needs the prestige. Twitch is already established, right? The only question is Twitch crazy enough to pay to block? But those blocking strategies, they run out of fuel. You can't block for forever, right? Like it is not a strategy to purchase all the rights yourself ad infinitum, because eventually you get bid up out of the game. You can't make money off of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the number's probably off just because I don't think a Chinese impression is worth a US impression. And I think everyone knows that, right? Like a Chinese viewer will spend 1/10 what a US viewer will spend. And not only that, everyone knows the Chinese numbers are inflated, right? Like the impressions numbers sort of can't be trusted. I would be surprised, William, if this goes for less than the Billy number. I would be surprised. I have a funny feeling it goes for more than the Billy number.
And I would be surprised if this goes to YouTube. In fact, I'll go so far as to say it is not.
Look. So here's my reasoning.
Yeah.
We've got Twitch, right? Twitch has shown they have deep pockets, right? They've got Amazon Bezos pockets. They could easily write a $100, $200, $300 million check and no one even knows it's gone.
Bezos could just buy the rights himself and stream it to his home theater.
Yeah, right. But seriously, it's not a lack of deep pockets, but I think they've shown a lack of desire to pay for exclusive content. Like they just don't seem that convinced that this is what makes their platform special.
I don't see it in their strategy. And maybe the LCS is different. Maybe it's such a crown jewel. They just say, look, like there's a place where we draw the line, because they did re-sign those streamers, right? That did the Mixer, but they had
no problem losing them too, right?
That's kind of what I think Twitch might play a game here, which is, okay, Riot, you don't think you need us? Let's see what happens over the next 3 years, you know? Like,
and look, they saw Overwatch League and Call of Duty League go to YouTube, and that was a disaster, basically. I mean, that has not panned out. There's like both of them have sort of seen either flat or declining audience numbers.
Risk in market shows that when you roll the dice on Twitch, the underlying property suffers. And I suspect Twitch is happy to try to teach that lesson to people, and definitely throws that muscle around on the negotiating table. Agreed.
So I think Twitch doesn't pick it up, right? And so who does it leave? So the Trovo theory is interesting, but I think
maybe one of those Trovo, Baidu, like I use those all interchangeably.
Hang on, let me
own backed streaming platform.
Yeah, but I would discount them because, again, if I'm going through the list, I think Tencent is too greedy. And in the Billy example perfectly, right? Instead of moving money from one pocket to another, they're very happy taking money in from someone else, right? And they're still on Riot, so like they're going to maximize the value of Riot. If they want to make Trovo a thing, they can easily do that some other way. I'm not convinced on the Trovo. I think it's clever, and I hadn't thought of it, William. But I'm not convinced, right? So who does that leave? In my mind, it leaves only two other options. One I thought about only just now, but it fundamentally leaves YouTube and Facebook. And I have to believe, so YouTube can definitely afford it, right? The question is, are they so burned by the Activision Blizzard experience that they don't do it again?
Yeah, they're going to look at the internal comps. They're going to see what they're getting for COD and Overwatch, and they're going to say, we wouldn't sign that deal again. It's just, you know how it works organizationally. It's an uphill battle to go back to a well when the first draw didn't come out clean. I'm not saying it's a bad strategic move for them. I just can't imagine them signing it based on the cost performance they've seen for their current leagues. So Facebook is interesting. We didn't talk about FB.GG. We did not bring that one up.
That would be a big get. And they have the pockets.
By Mixer, so something.
Matt, you got to call it so we can move on. Facebook or YouTube? For me, it's a 50-50 toss up.
Or Trovo or the Chinese platform.
I think Disney's a dark horse for sure. I don't know, man. I mean, William makes a great point. Like organizationally, it's a really tough sell. After the two recent examples, Facebook's an interesting one. I mean, if they have the money, which they do, if I'm Riot, I guess it depends on what my priorities are, because I don't think putting it there would necessarily be in the best interest of the league and its marketability and its growth in terms of the demographics that are on Facebook, in my opinion. But
can I revise my prediction
YouTube's the most likely.
Probably, yeah, I would say so.
Without having insider knowledge here, right?
Sure. Yeah, I don't have any.
I want to revise my prediction very slightly. I think this is a good one to end on. This is a noodle point here. Split North American rights, traditional broadcast, Baidu, Trovo, whatever, VR broadcasting, Facebook.
It's an out there one. I look.
Dude, this is why you have me as the co-host. I'm telling you, that makes a lot. You'll maximize your value by licensing the rights as the rights holder.
I thought you were going with just geographic slicing, not.
No. And where Facebook has shown a desire to spend and know gaming quite well is the VR space and Oculus. And this would be a pretty massive adoption driver for Oculus. Particularly, they could market this as like the best way to watch League is in VR. Guys, do I really think that will happen? But is it cool enough to noodle? For sure. So I'm betting on it.
I think regardless of who buys it, I mean, the numbers that we're throwing around in comparison to rights fees for professional sports leagues are minuscule. I mean, the NBA's the $24 billion deal over 9 years, right? It's like 2.8. So but league and esports in general is inherently more global. And so regardless of who buys it, I think the trajectory and the excitement that we have in the decades to come is worth just noting in itself. And
I think we'll look back 10 years from now and say they got a deal, whoever picked it up, right? Like that's probably the reality, no matter what the going rate is.
It is funny. If you could do a 3-year deal with the NFL for $125 million, you would walk that to the bank right away.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you would. Guys, let's move on. Let's touch on one last thing here before we wrap up. This is all about Call of Duty League. Now, the headline here is from .esports. The headline is Optic Scump hints at possible Call of Duty League players union. And the reason why is obviously Call of Duty League has had some issues with players. I mean, Scump specifically was fined, but also at the end of last season, which just happened recently, like almost many of the teams basically just fired players because next year it's going to a roster with one fewer player. I don't know if you guys had been following that, but like players just got sort of arbitrarily fired without much cause or notice because the league has changed its format. Now they're talking about organizing. They're talking about putting together a players union before the next season so that players have more power in their negotiations. I'm curious to get both of your opinions, Matt. Like, I know this doesn't touch your business directly, but as an esports fan yourself, do you think this hurts Call of Duty League? Do you think in the long run, this makes it more sustainable? Like, where are you on the fence when it comes to these things?
I think it makes it way more sustainable. I think, I have no inside information. I don't know anything about, the accusations or the things that Scump said, but I do know that every major professional sports league has a players union, has, a collective bargaining agreement, and ultimately it's how things get done, and it's how both sides are treated fairly, and how you can push something and, push a league to continue to grow. Distribution changes, like balance of power changes. And so I think the one thing that we're seeing with the CDL, which is really cool, is that these individual personalities and these individual players have a lot of power. It's a very star-driven league. And so I think a union is really important. And I think that that Activision should welcome that, because it's one step closer towards not to say that this is their goal, but it's one step closer to like truly emulating what professional sports is and how it's run. And to not have one, I think is it just shows that we're in our infancy.
Let me push back a bit, Matt, and maybe I'll push back on you, and then I'll leave it open, William, to you if you want to jump in here. But one of the things we talk about all the time, and William knows this because he owns a professional esports team. One thing that has been disconnected from some reality is player salaries, right? That player salaries in esports have tended to be higher than the revenues that the esports teams are actually generating, which is why it's a pretty big struggle owning and operating an esports team these days, unless you're Cloud9 or 100 Thieves or whatever. And even then, none of those businesses are profitable, right? They're all burning cash.
Right.
Now, player salaries are just part of the issue. The question is, if we give more power to the players, and I understand how that fixes some of the structural problems, the fines, the firings, right? Some of those things go away and make it more fair for them. The question is, will we see runaway player salaries that essentially kill the entire ecosystem, right? Where teams start failing because they can't afford to pay the salaries that the players want. And with additional negotiating leverage, now the players can really get it.
Right. Well, let me hop in, and William, I definitely want to hear your perspective sitting on the other side of the table. I'm not advocating for higher salaries, and I think in certain situations I could even, I would even maybe. I'm not advocating for this, but maybe lower salaries make sense. I think that the point of a collective bargaining agreement, and what you see in the NBA and the WNBA and the NFL, is that it's a percentage of revenue, and it's you can't just throw out arbitrary numbers and say we want to make X a year. You say we want X percent of revenue, and if revenue goes down because a GM says something about China, and then your league is blackballed from a country, or if there's a pandemic and you can't play, then salaries are going to go down to reflect that. And so what I think about when I think about a collective bargaining agreement and a players union is just an equitable split, not necessarily the right to demand ridiculous salaries with no ground to stand on. And so I'm not in favor of that. Just wanted to clear that up, because I agree with you completely.
William, do you think that's the likely outcome here, that they stay? They the players union comes together. They managed to get rid of sort of all the horrible stuff that's happening, and sort of it's a nicer environment for players, but that there's no consequence, a negative consequence of any kind to the teams in the long run.
Well, I let me kind of jump in here and say, look, so first of all, I think as a principle, on principle, I think players unions are really good and important, right? I think for a lot of the same reasons why Matt brought them up. It's just you have them in sports organizations for a reason. It's to ensure equity and fairness, and also to protect the players too, right? Some of the stuff that's, being accused about Call of Duty right now is just being forced to sign contracts on short notice with no review time and no legal counsel. I don't know if that's true or not, but this is why you have a union. It has nothing to do with wages or income. It's just a protection, right? If a group stands together and says, hey, we need 2 weeks to review the contract, they get 2 weeks to review the contract. So I think in general, I'm for it. And not in general, I pretty much am unequivocally for it and a huge supporter. I get worried in this specific instance. And the reason is because this is not like traditional sports where, the classic story was exploitative management, salaries, significantly undercompensated, the need to protect, to generate salaries and ensure an equitable share. And the reality is, I think the expectations of every one of those players is when you join the union, we're going to get other stuff. We will also be able to collectively bargain for higher salaries. The problem is the salaries in these league structures were created by fiat. Right. They were essentially, the publisher just sort of said, okay, we think this is a sport, so these guys earn $100,000 a year. That's the price. There was no clearing price in the market for what viewership and equitable and everything, understood, right? And as a result of that, my concern is that the players would be going into this with an unrealistic expectation, which is a result of unionizing, they might drive higher wages. And they might deserve it. I don't have the viewership numbers. Maybe they do, and that's the case. I suspect unionization in Call of Duty should be more about all the other things and not the wage price. But at the end of the day, I think most people think of unions as driving wages and benefits. And I think this has a real challenge of being a threat to the league for that reason, because I think most teams in the Activision Blizzard leagues right now are looking at how do we get our costs down? How do we get our costs down? And the reality is, I think the players, when they unionize, they're thinking more benefits, more wages, cost up. And so again, I want to be so clear. This is not me being critical of unions. I think unions are awesome. I think they're important for esports. I think pretty much every major game should have them. My concern here is if this causes a friction point that, I don't think the league needs right now. And ultimately, and this will be my final thing, what matters most for both the players, the publisher, and the teams is the health of the game. And I think Call of Duty is actually at a good spot right now. It's come out from the shadow of Overwatch. It looks like it's defining its own identity and finding an audience. It looks like the Call of Duty brand has more potential than maybe people had realized for esportsification. It still has a long way to go. We're still not at LCS style numbers yet, right? The league needs to be firing on all cylinders, and particularly for the league to work, the players, the teams, and the publishers need to really closely coordinate. And I fear that for some of the right reasons, this might be a wrench in that early momentum that's building behind the league right now. But again, don't construe this as me not supporting unions, because I'm super, super for it. But I am very aware of a chasm that could be opening for that league. And it needs to be focused externally right now, not internally.
Yeah, my criticism here is I sort of don't care about the union versus not union issue. Because to me, that's not what I take away from this story. I look at the story and my takeaway is Activision Blizzard continues to be totally clueless. There's just so much mismanagement. No, but seriously, right? You've got a new league. Okay. Overwatch League has failed. I think everyone agrees this is a property that is dying, will die, has no future. Call of Duty maybe has some potential, right? And yet, they continue to mess up very simple things, right? Forget about all the other things we've discussed. Now you have players in your 2-year-old league who are so unhappy, right? They feel the need to organize to satisfy their unhappiness, right? This is not about unionization or players. This is about management at Activision Blizzard, who, if they had done their jobs right, would not have this issue in the first place. If they had structured this right, would not have this issue in the first place. They continue to mismanage these leagues. They continue to do very bad things. They continue to just make very poor business decisions. And what we're seeing is just a consequence. I think it's a symptom, right? It's a symptom of unhappy players and as a consequence of the bad decisions the league has made. So to me, if you can fix Activision Blizzard, all of this stuff doesn't matter, right? You can find a system that works with or without players unions. The problem is Activision Blizzard continues to show that there's a total lack of good management there. There's a total lack of any business sense there. And it scares me for the future of Call of Duty, because if they've already managed to piss off the players, right? Yes, a players union may fix that next year, the year after, but Activision Blizzard is going to continue mismanaging this property. Their bad decision-making is not going to go away. That's the bigger problem, if you ask me, not the shorter-term player issues.
We know that where we stand, where I'm the Blizzard apologist and you're the Blizzard, apocalyptic. But
is my logic wrong, William?
I do think it's a fair point that if you looked at it a priori, and because why do people unionize? Because they're unhappy. That's fundamentally true. If you're happy, you don't really unionize, right?
Yeah.
In general, right? If you're getting all the benefits you think you're due, you don't need a union, right?
Yes.
I do think it's a good point that if you go back in time and see, Activision Blizzard has created a massive professional sports league around your game. They have guaranteed you a livelihood for many players where previously they probably were earning fractional amounts of what they were getting right now, fifth to a tenth, right? They've created star status and cult of personality and begun to develop through some of these leagues and traditional sports relationships, real personality cults around some of the players. Like, these should be guys who are thrilled, right? And I do think it's interesting that they feel a little bit gypped. I also think it certainly goes to, where will the union get the leverage? Is it with the teams or is it with the publisher, right? Because at the end of the day, I think part of the reason why they unionize is they look at that YouTube contract, 100 million. Where's our share? Who's getting the majority of that share today? It's not the teams who traditionally the unions negotiate for. It's actually the publisher. So it could be an interesting new type of three-way dynamic you don't see as much in traditional sports.
That's fair. That's a good point. Guys, before we wrap up here, I just, William, you always got to take their side, eh? You always have to. But my logic is sound.
Why I love them. I can't lie to you. I
know, but my logic, you can't argue with my logic. That's the problem.
I can't argue with their stock price, Paul. Their stock price keeps going up. Bobby Kodak's doing something right.
People are playing Call of Duty. Doesn't mean Call of Duty League's going to work.
Market judges.
Before we wrap up here, I just want to say a quick word. The single fastest growing area of esports, guys, everyone knows, is betting. You don't need to be a prophet like me to see that. But for all of you who listen to the podcast regularly, I've stayed away personally from esports betting because of the reputational risk. Now, one company that completely solves that, in my opinion, is Esports Entertainment Group. They're NASDAQ listed, fully regulated. Ticker symbol GMBL. Now, we had the CEO of the company on the podcast. We've had him on a few times. Really great business. I would highly recommend checking them out. If you're an investor, family office, and really interested in the markets in esports at all, go check out esportsentertainmentgroup.com, because I really think it is the best way to get exposure to esports and the esports betting space. Having said that, small disclaimer, it's just my opinion. I'm not an investment advisor. I'm not selling stock. Do your own research. Seek advice from a licensed professional if you're looking to invest in the field. Guys, Matt, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Before we sign off here, anything you want our viewers to know, anything you want to shill, anything you want to, shills always, I hate using that word. Anything you want to promote.
Anything I want to promote. I mean, please reach out. If you thought that, we had an interesting conversation and you liked anything that I had to say, would love to meet you, whether you're in gaming or not, whether you're a brand who's looking for some marketing help, whether you are a startup who's looking for investment, whether you are, whatever. I'm here. My email, can I do my email?
Yeah, of course. And maybe the best way to reach you, is it LinkedIn? Yeah. Is it email? Is it Twitter? I don't know.
Either one. LinkedIn, you can just Matt. I forget if it's Matt or Matthew, but you'll find me, Matt Hillman. And then Twitter is probably actually the better way to reach out. And my Twitter, guys, don't laugh. It's like still my name from high school. It's I love Matty Ice, all one word. They used to be my nickname. Some people still call me Matty Ice. So
I love Matty Ice, all in one word. LOVE MATTY.
ICE. That's me.
I see. I love it.
Yeah,
why Matty Ice?
I played basketball in high school, and I was pretty good, and so people just kind of started calling me Matty Ice through that. I guess
shouldn't you be a hockey player for Matty Ice?
Matty Ice, the adult beverage.
No, nothing to do with the adult beverage, but I guess in basketball or in sports, if you're clutch or if you have ice in your veins or whatever, they call you that. So anyway, they started calling me that, and then I just made that my name, and I haven't changed it since. So
I love it. Yeah. I love Matty Ice on Twitter, guys. Matt Hillman on LinkedIn, right?
Yep. Cutandso.la, zone.gg.
Whoa.
Very cool. Thank you so much for being on the show, Matt. As always, William, thank you. And for our regular listeners, don't forget, every Wednesday evening, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, we do a live stream. It's our after show live stream. It's a lot of fun. It's interactive. We cover the stuff that we don't make it to on the podcast. But most importantly, we get to take your questions. We get to chat with you guys. We get to interact with you guys. It's a lot of fun. We go live now on a bunch of platforms. We're live on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, just about everywhere you can find us. William's book on Amazon, The Book of Esports. make sure you go pick that up. It makes for the perfect Thanksgiving gift. Don't bring a turkey, bring the Book of Esports. Are you going to have a what do you call it? A sale for, what's it called? Why am I drawing a blank here? It's an American thing.
Cyber Monday.
So Cyber Monday or Black Friday.
I don't know. We've talked about it, but the printed copies are running pretty low, so it might actually not happen because it's between printings right now. Where we could be gearing up for the third printing, which would be pretty amazing.
Okay, so don't make me push this for Thanksgiving if you're not even going to have a Black Friday deal.
Look, I'm not the publisher, but listen, guys, whether the book, as we established earlier with Matt, this is a price insensitive audience, and this is the gold standard of esports knowledge. So whether it's $24.99, $19.99, or we raise the price to $49.99, I promise you will enjoy the Book of Esports, and it will be well worth your time.
And stay tuned for a Business of Esports chair, which I'm sure will come out sometime in the next 5 to 10 years.
Please.
With aim assist.
With aim assist.
And on that note, guys, again, thank you for listening. Thank you for those 5-star ratings, reviews. Tell your friends.
So many.
And we will see you guys next week.